So there's the verses, and here's our screen. So the idea that Paul is writing in large letters, I'm not sure that we can say that it's significant one way or the other that he was writing. One person I was reading said that it would be like us sending an email and hitting all caps maybe, so that would make emphasis on on the letter itself, and possibly so that's what he was doing. And then a lot of times he does, he will write at the end of his letter. He will write things himself just to authenticate the letter, so that no one would know that, or everyone would know then that it was actually him that was writing it, and not some forgery. So, but I think it would have been easy for people to tell, because if it was simple and easy to understand, it wouldn't be Paul. So he didn't have to really worry about that. So anyway, that's verse 11, and I don't think that it's got anything of great significance there, other than maybe it's Paul saying, okay, now this is I'm writing this in my own handwriting. And then what happens is, this is my story, that he falls right into verse 12, and then verse 12 says, "Those who desire to make a good showing in the flesh try to compel you to be circumcised, simply so that they will not be persecuted for the cross of Messiah." Now, I think what it may very well be doing it is that he's ascribing to ascribing motives to the Judaizers or the influencers or whatever, and he's telling them that that all they're trying to do is please men, and maybe even reducing their own persecution as such. And so that begs the question then, okay, well, persecution from what? And so, there's certain things that we just don't know about what was going on out there in Galatia as to, who was persecuting whom. And, we pretty well have figured out that the influencers or the Judaizers are God-fearing Gentiles that have then converted to Judaism and gone through the whole ritual with the circumcision and mikvah and the whole 9 yards. So I think that by looking at who it is that are the influencers, maybe it gives us a little bit of a clue as to who what the persecution would have been. And I think there's probably two major things that might have been or two main things anyway. And one of them was from the non-believing Jews, because let's face it, Paul and his gospel are bringing in a lot of Gentiles into the synagogues, and kind of overwhelming the synagogue. They're not used to large numbers of new people coming into a synagogue. It was back in those days, and I think even today, it was a fairly a closed society, I guess you would say, that they didn't have a lot of ebb and flow in terms of who went and who came, and it was the population of Jews in area would have been fairly static, so their participation in and membership in the synagogue also would have been static, and not a lot of people coming and not a lot of people going. So when
Christians would have been considered pagan.
Well, yes and no. Until they converted. Until they're converted.
Still do, because we believe in Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They consider that we believe in three gods. They consider that.
But the big deal was that there was so many new people coming in. They were the God-fearers were fine, because they kind of controlled that. It wasn't a whole lot of people. But then when Paul comes in there and he's preaching this gospel that, hey, you can come in, you can be part of the fellowship or the commonwealth of Israel, and believe in the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and not go through the circumcision rite. Well, then that's a good deal there, because then they don't have to go through the pain and the aggravation of circumcision, and they can be part of the club, as it were. So they would probably get some persecution or some pushback then from the non-believing Jews. The other side of it would possibly the persecution that he's talking about would have been the government at the time, because they required everyone to participate in this cultic worship of the emperor. They had to go to certain festivities several times a year and participate and be in the cheerleading squad there, and when when at the right time they would do their 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate? Whoever the emperor was at the time, and so the only way that you could get out of that is if you were legitimately Jewish, because Julius Caesar had said years before that, okay, I like the Jewish people, I like their religion and respect them, and so they're the only ones that don't have to do what this emperor worship stuff. So then comes along the God-fearers who are trying to attach themselves to the Jewish synagogue, and so they're kind of in between. They're not Jewish, and but they're not wanting to go and do the pagan worship either, and that they would be forced to. And then the government would be after them for that. So these people that so that's part of where the pressure would have come on the non-Jewish believers that were in Galatia at the time, because these influencers, or I think that's what we've been trying to call them, is the influencers. The Bible calls them judaizers, but that's also a kind of a harsh term. But influencers, I think, is more apropos of what, or a more correct term of what they were actually trying to do. So there would have been some turmoil between the Jewish non-believers in the synagogue and then the government, and so then these influencers would be trying to bring these other people in, legitimately so. I think we have to remember that the influencers, as it were just following the halakha of the day, meaning that if you wanted to attach yourself to the Jewish people, you had to go through the conversion. And up until Paul and Peter and the Council of Jerusalem in Acts 15. Up until that time, the halakha was, or the mode of operation was that you did go through ritual conversion if you were going to be Jewish. Now, of course, up until Cornelius, Gentiles were not brought into the family of believers believing in Yeshua. So, that was a new wrinkle in everything. So this thing that we're studying here in Galatians is it was in flux at the time. Something wasn't really established at that time, and we know that Galatians was written prior to the Acts 15, or we can surmise, or anyway, that's what I think that it is. So because I think Paul would have used the words of James, in his letter had that conference already taken place. So anyway, that's what he's talking about there in verse 12. And I think though that when it says for the cross, I'm not sure that at that point the cross had become the symbol of Yeshua that it did later on. And so, there's some that think that anyway, and I'm not real sure about it, whether the cross did or not. But we do know that there was definitely problems coming from the Jewish non-believers because of all of these people coming in. The new believers in Yeshua were coming in to the synagogue and worshiping there. So going on then with verse 13, and let's see, we'll go back. We'll look at here. It says, "For not even the circumcised keep Torah themselves. Yet they want you to be they want to have you circumcised, so that they may boast about your flesh." Okay. So who are the circumcised? Again, it depends on how you read the Greek, whether it's some of the different interpretations of whether that was and okay, this goes into grammar stuff, so that you school teachers in there, just forgive me for all this kind of stuff, because English was never my strong suit. But a lot of it was depending on whether it was some kind of a perfect tense, or a future perfect tense, or a past perfect tense, or imperfect tense, or I don't know, or
pretense,
pretense, or a Mount Everest tense. I don't have any clue. But it was the circumcised could be it could be, okay, are that the Jewish people? Is that the Jewish folks? Then it could be the influencers, the Gentiles who had gone through the ritual conversion, and then it could have also it could have been, depending on whether or not it was an ongoing thing, was whether or not, it could have been the people who were in the process of undergoing the conversion, and maybe had or had not, at that point had just undergone the circumcision. So Paul is talking about, we don't really know exactly who he's talking about. I kind of fall in on the side of that. These are the new Gentiles who had come into faith and had just in the last year or two, whatever, had become circumcised because they didn't grow up in the tradition of the Jews, and so they were still, even though they had attached themselves, they'd gone through the ritual of the circumcision and the mikvah and all of that. There were still things that perhaps they didn't do. So what's he saying then? Not keeping Torah in a general sense. What was he saying that? We all know that it's impossible for a mortal person like us to always keep Torah perfectly. It's not possible. Only Yeshua could have done that. So is Paul talking about the general sense of the impossibility of keeping Torah? Is saying that they're not keeping Torah? I don't think that's the case, because that's kind of a given. Even the Jewish non-believers would they'd have to say, okay, well, yeah, they have infractions once in a while too. That's why there was still at that time there was still a sacrificial system there at the temple. So what is he saying here? Maybe it could be the influencers' wrong motives, that they're wanting other people to come in and do this circumcision for motives that are not in keeping with Torah of loving your neighbor as yourself and so forth. And maybe a kind of jealousy or a competitiveness that the influencers were say, well, look, we've done this, we've gone through this whole thing, and so if we've done it, then you got to do it too. Those kinds of things. Another thing that was brought up is possibly that and I put mysticism or ritual ideas, the idea of the circumcision being the end all, and so you could almost look at they were saying, okay, now if you're circumcised, it would equate to those today who are the eternal security, or the once saved always saved, that okay, now you've been circumcised, then you're golden, you're in, you don't have to worry about the world to come, because now you've passed through the gate of circumcision, and therefore you don't have to worry about it. And so there was that possibility that there's some evidence that the circumcision idea was in those days its own set of in mysticism and the Gnostic ideas of the day, that it was just a higher spiritual plane and so forth. So there's that Paul is talking about, that they're not keeping Torah. So with all of this, he's trying to make his case that, look, these influencers are trying to push you into something, and they're not even keeping up with Torah. So I think that you could look at several things here and see what try to figure out what Paul may or may not have been talking about on keeping Torah. But I personally think he was kind of looking at it as from the standpoint of the once saved always saved, the eternal security, that okay, now that you're circumcised, you got it, bud. You don't have to worry about it. I think if you go to next. It was actually next in my notes here that Romans 2:17. It says, "If you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law and boast in God and know His will and approve what is excellent because you are instructed from the law, and if you are sure that you yourself are a guide to the blind, i.e. the Gentiles, a light to those who are in darkness, you who boast in the Torah dishonor God by breaking Torah. For circumcision, being Jewish, indeed is of value if you obey the Torah. But if you break the Torah, your circumcision or your Jewishness becomes uncircumcision, Gentileness." That's kind of a paraphrase of Romans 2:17 through 25. But, a lot of times people will tend to trade this institutional status for actual obedience and relationship with God. And we see it. We do see it today in this world that somebody says, "Well, now that you're saved, you're good," and that especially now there's this stuff going around called the hyper grace. I've mentioned it before, and if you ever want to really get a good handle on that philosophy, you need to read Dr. Michael Brown's book called Hyper Grace, and it's where he brings it up and he explains why this is wrong and how it's dangerous. That you're telling people that you can go and you actually can't sin anymore, and that if you do go and repent, then you're showing a lack of faith in your initial salvation and so forth. So there, we still have some of that kind of some of that kind of thing today. So if we look at, let's go ahead and continue on with this. But Paul is saying, "But may it never be that I would boast except in the cross of our Lord Yeshua, the Messiah, through which the world has been crucified to me, and I to the world. For neither is circumcision anything, nor uncircumcision, but a new creation. And those who walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon you and upon the Israel of God." Okay. Before we get into the Israel of God idea, Paul is saying, he had told them these guys are doing this to boast. Maybe it's kind of like putting a notch in your gun, where they've got another God fear that went through the circumcision thing, and chalk one up for my side. It's kind of a boastful thing. But Paul says, look, I will never boast except in the cross of the Lord Yeshua, the Messiah. And so that, to me, that means that Paul was just absolutely, totally absorbed in Yeshua and his gospel, that everything that he did, and just looking at his life and his testimony and what he did, all the things that he got beat up for and almost killed for, he would have to be a serious believer to go through all of that. And I think it's kind of interesting in a way that people use, Paul talks about taking, accepting the cross of our Lord Yeshua. And even Yeshua himself has said that people should take up their cross and follow him. And, I've not been able to really nail that down in my own mind as to, the idea of the cross, how that fit into the Jewish culture and the Jewish mindset as far as being cross being a burden or take up a standard or something like that. You take up your cross and follow him. But Yeshua used those words about the cross. He didn't say take up your execution stake. The word was he used cross. So I have I've tried to do a little bit of study on that, and have just really, it's still kind of fluid for me. I haven't quite figured out the influence of the word cross on the Jewish culture in 30 A.D. to 70 A.D. sometime in that time frame. What it would have meant to the population that was there. So it's anyway. We do know that Paul used the word several times, and Yeshua used it. Other ones used the cross, and a lot of times it's kind of popular nowadays to say, "Oh, we don't say cross, we say the execution stake or the tree or whatever." But I'm not sure it's all that important, because Yeshua himself said, take up your cross and follow me. He didn't say take up your tree and follow me. But then he goes on, Paul says, for neither circumcision nor uncircumcision means anything, but only a new creation. Now, remember back, we had been in Galatians before, and earlier in Galatians, where he said there's neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female, slave or free, he was saying that under the blood of Yeshua, that all of us are equal. There's no special case for the Jews being on a higher plane than the Gentiles, or if you're a free man, then you're more free if you're in Yeshua than the slave who is also a believer in Yeshua. And certainly he said there's neither male nor female. We know that there still exists male and female. So Paul was not saying it wipes out the distinctions between these of the Jew and the Gentile, the free and the slave, and the male and the female. Those distinctions still existed physically and in the world at the time. But he was just saying that in God's sight, in being right standing before God, that it didn't make any difference. And so he's saying the same thing here, that it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not Jewish. That doesn't mean anything in terms of your salvation, but only a new creation. And here, this word that he uses, a new creation, it kind of harks back to the first creation, that God had made all of the creation, the moon, the stars, the earth, the ocean, the water, the fish and the birds, and all the different animals. He made Adam, and then he did all of that, and then he said, "Whoa, you know what? I need to make something else." So he created Eve, and so it was a new creation that was actually not part of the very first sequence of creation, because the way I look at it is that Adam was around a while after the creation was finished. I know there are some that will say that God created Eve before he rested on the on Shabbat, and I'm not I'm not really sure I can say that, because I think that he did rest, and Adam rested, and then sometime later God created the woman, and nobody's rested since then. So
watch out! Watch out! I'm listening to this.
I was wondering how I was going to get that joke in. All right. But anyway, he's harking back to this new creation of Chava, of Eve, and that new creation as something completely different. And I've also heard it said that when God created God created Adam, he looked down and says, I can do better than that, and he created Eve. So that's for the ladies there. Okay.
You're just trying to save yourself.
I'm trying to save myself. Okay. But anyway, what we're saying here is what Paul is saying, that the lines between the Jew and the Gentile believers in relation to right standing before God are completely erased. There is no difference between a Jew and a Gentile. As long as they believe in Yeshua, then they are exactly the same in God's sight, and we are indeed a new creation. We're called in several places in the New Testament to just put off that old sinful nature, let it go, put it away, because you're new, and you need to walk in the newness of life and newness of the Spirit. And so I think that that's basically what Paul is saying in this regard. Now we come to this phrase here, where it says, "Now as many as live by this rule, shalom and mercy on them and on the Israel of God." And I have been reading several authors in the last couple of weeks on just this one thing, the Israel of God, what it means. Now, I think that a lot of the maybe dispensationalists and others have taken this to mean, basically, I think this might have been part of the genesis of the replacement theology, where now God he's done with the Jews as such, as an ethnic group, and now the Israel of God, and this is the only place in Scripture that this phrase is used, the Israel of God. This is the only place that it's used. They say, well, that means that we're looking at the church, as it were, the only those that were that believe in Yeshua, and that has completely replaced any and all the promises that God had given to Israel, because now, because of our status with God and we believe in the Son of God, then that's what this Israel of God is. But I can tell you that the Israel of God is not the church, as it were, because God has not replaced Israel in his eschatology, as end time. He's always going to have a place for Israel. Now, and it's also on the other side of thing. It's not the Israel of God is not Israel, the unbelieving part of Israel, the part that's not believing in Yeshua. That's not the Israel of God, because what he says, "And now as many as live by this rule, shalom and mercy on them and on the Israel of God." And this shalom and mercy on them. David Stern looks at this and he says, you know what? This is no more than just a greeting that that people use. He said the shalom. He said it could mean the hello. It's in David Stern's idea or his mind, this shalom here and mercy on the. He said it's a greeting, but he says by the same token, it's the grammar and the placement of the words and everything is a little bit out of whack. So he said it does bring you around to looking at this Israel of God as to who it really would be, who it really is. And so I think we could say that the Israel of God is this what we've talked about, this greater commonwealth of Israel, where the Gentiles are grafted into the natural stock of Yeshua the Messiah. The Gentiles are grafted in, and actually the Jewish believers are regrafted into Yeshua. So that, in my mind, is what we're talking about here with the Israel of God. And there's it goes on for volumes and volumes of people talking about what the Israel of God really means. But I think this is what I came up with is how I believe it. Like I said, David Stern went on for about 10 pages on what the Israel of God was. But David Stern is he's the guy that wrote the complete Jewish Bible, and so what I was reading from is what I was reading from is this the Jewish New Testament commentary. And so if you don't have this, for those who are in the class, if you do not have this Jewish New Testament commentary, I would urge you to get that, because it's got some great commentary and explanations about the New Testament, and David Stern is generally spot on when it comes to his commentaries. So anyway, we're coming to the end of this, and Paul says, look, I don't want to be bothered by this anymore. He kind of puts it in a different different language that I wouldn't probably have figured this out, that he would have been able to do that, but to say that, but that's kind of what he's saying. So from now on, let no one cause trouble for me, for I bear on my body the brand marks of Yeshua. He said, look, I don't want to be bothered by this anymore. Just let's not get into this anymore. I've told it all to you, and I've retold it, and I've told it again, and so let's don't do it anymore. He said, because with all of your persecution, it's nothing compared to the scars that he himself had suffered. Because he goes through it. Where he had been beaten with rods, and he had been stoned and left for dead. He'd been shipwrecked, I think 3 times, and one time he spent a day and a half floating around on some flotsam and jetsam. That's a wooden plank. But anyway, so he's just saying, look, let's go on and do. We don't have to revisit this anymore. And then he does end up with a very gracious blessing at the end. And I think he's gone through. He's done his teaching and been let's put it to rest. And now let me go ahead and give you a blessing.